Imagine kids who've never been in a public school. Can you imagine that? And then imagine when they grow up and become parents. It's a very different outlook. And so that's why I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk to you today, because you have that. You have that. I've never been to public school. Here's what life is like. It's very normal. You're not a weirdo. You are successful in your career and you're homeschooling your kids. And I think that's the picture that more people need to see, because it's really happening all around. Homeschooling has grown by leaps and bounds over the past 40 years, and many people may not realize that homeschool graduates are actually all around us, managing careers and homes and families, and pretty much living very normal lives. When social media commenters snarkily tell me that my kids are going to grow up and be weird and unable to function, I usually just laugh and inform them that there are probably adults all around them right now who were homeschooled and they just don't realize it. My guest today is one of them. Liberty McArtor graduated from a lifetime of home education in 2011, and she is here today to give us a glimpse into her homeschool years as well as what she's doing now. Welcome to the show, Liberty.
Thank you, Nikki.
One more note about Liberty. She is actually my cousin. Last week, we had her mom on the show talking about her experiences as sort of a pioneer in the olden days. And so now we get to interview one of Carrie's three children. Liberty is the youngest of those three. So, Liberty, you had the benefit of Carrie having had plenty years of experience under her belt by the time you came along.
Hmm.
Instead of being the guinea pig, you kind of got the, okay, now I know what I'm doing, mom. So,
Yes.
why don't you tell us? I have a little bit I want to ask you about your homeschool experience. So, how long, first of all, were you homeschooled?
I was homeschooled, I guess you could say technically starting in kindergarten, but from birth when
Yeah,
you're homeschooling. Yeah, my older brother and sister like to remind me that I had different parents than they had, but
yeah.
it's because I have such a big age gap, and I'm like, hey, I can't help it when I was born. But no, yeah, I had a great homeschooling experience, and it was all the way through. I never knew anything different.
All right. So, what are some of your favorite memories from being homeschooled? I know that's a wide open question. You just give us whatever you got.
Yeah, well, in terms of the education or the academic side, some of the things that really stick out to me were just the opportunities to have learning come alive. And my parents were really good at that. And I think that's true all the time that they were homeschooling because they both have always worked with kids and they get really into making whatever it is exciting. And so when we learned about colonial times, like I remember my mom inviting cousins over and we just made a big day of it, and it was like we're no electricity, no lights, we all had these costumes. And but that was really fun because I could really just get into it and engage my imagination. And then my mom and dad obviously led and taught classes at co-ops, like enrichment classes, and my
Mhm.
dad would always do history classes, and that's his area of passion. But he really does such a great job at making that come alive for kids as well. So there would always be field trips, and even in grade school or middle school, we would all the kids in the class would have costumes, and we would be reenacting historical battles and have lines to say, but we were just having a great time. And it's probably like there are some of those lessons that it was more than just a date for me, and that is a lot more real in my mind than it would have been if I had just been only reading the textbook and not having that freedom to really engage more. And then obviously, so many extracurricular opportunities came with homeschooling that were core to who I am, which I'm sure we can talk about more, but those are really the things that I appreciated.
So, let me ask you this. Did you have friends? Obviously, you did. How did you socialize?
Yeah, the joke, which I'm sure many other people have said, is like we were too socialized.
Yes.
And I, obviously I had church friends. And so, and I was really blessed with some great church friends that are still my friends to this day. And so that's something that it doesn't matter what school you're going to, if you're connected to a good church, then that's a lot of socialization right there. And we were very involved with that throughout the week too. And
Mhm.
then, my mom led a co-op for our local area enrichment classes, and so those were weekly classes throughout the school year. And then so many other extracurricular opportunities too, things like 4-H and local community theater. And then we had homeschool sports leagues. And I know people think sometimes that you can't do sports if you're homeschooled, but it's like totally the opposite. And so, yeah, there were so many years of my life where every single night we had an activity, and my parents would be like, okay, you got to drop one thing.
Yeah.
But I was seeing my friends every day and a wide group of people too. So I had great friends. And this is something that's true for me and my husband. We actually have a very great network of friends that we've known since childhood, and
Mm.
we've actually maintained those friends, and that's pretty unique, I feel like, for a lot of people. And we're just very grateful that we had the opportunity to invest in deep friendships like that.
And if I remember correctly, you were a very shy child. And
Yeah.
so even with that, you had a nice big social life with lots of friends, like you said, that you still have today. And so being an introverted and shy child doesn't become worse with homeschooling, I don't think.
Yeah, and my parents did a good job, and I appreciate this now that I'm a homeschool mom, and I'm like, oh, I want my kids to try this and this and this, and I'm like, wow, I have a whole new respect for my mom and dad because they were busy.
Yeah.
Just not just with this actual academics, but driving me around everywhere. So
Mhm.
they did a good job of helping me get out of my comfort zone. But yes, I had friends that I saw on a regular basis, but even things like saying, "Hey, why don't you do community theater?" And I really had to get over my fear of public speaking. And that was stuff that we had the flexibility in our schedule to do, and it was so good for me. And so I was challenged in a good way, and able to be socialized.
Yeah, my youngest daughter right now is 14, and I find that we're doing that challenging stuff now,
Hmm.
going to a class where she doesn't know any of the kids, but she wants to be there because she wants to learn the subject. So that's what's fun, and kids that are homeschooled are not missing out on that, but you do have the freedom to selectively choose when and how they're going to socialize so that depending on whatever their personality is, you fit that to them. And if they are weak in an area, you gently help them to grow in it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even whatever environment, there's always going to be shy kids.
Yep.
I mean, my son is, and I'm happy for him, but like as an introverted person to this day, we'll go to the playground and it doesn't matter if we know anybody there. He walks up and makes friends, and I'm like, oh, now I get to talk to the mom. But
Yeah.
that's because I'm introverted by nature. It's not because I don't have social skills.
Right.
And then my second born child is a little more shy, and so he's had to be a little bit more encouraged to like make friends at Sunday school and things, but that's their personality. It's you know
Yep. Yeah. I started with two shy kids. The third one was the complete opposite. Like you said, he would make friends in every store we went in, and I would think, oh, great. But it doesn't matter where you grow up or where you go to school. That's pretty much who you are. So
Mhm.
moms get to adapt to that.
Mhm.
So tell me about those hard subjects that your mom or dad maybe couldn't teach. I know Carrie didn't even finish high school,
Mhm.
but we talk a lot about that on the show that that's not really what determines if you can be a homeschool mom. So how did y'all address the hard topics?
Yeah, so my hard subject is math.
Same.
And yeah, I really struggled with that. And so, and I don't know why, but my, you know, mind just had a hard time
Hmm.
working that way. And so, starting probably in around middle school, or seventh grade, when I was getting into things like algebra,
Hmm.
um, my dad helped me a lot. He would help me with my homework, but my parents started doing some outsourcing also. And I actually appreciated that because I valued the opportunity to learn from other mentors and tutors and things like that as
Hmm.
well. So I love the bond that I had with my parents from homeschooling, but then I also got to learn from great people that they allowed to be in my life. And so, um, yeah, I went to classes with other kids, in other homeschoolers for middle school to learn algebra, and there was another social experience there.
Yep.
And we would all, the parents would carpool and take turns driving. And it's like, okay, we're going to algebra class. And the teacher was fun and he loved teaching it, but my mom didn't have to try to like push through teaching
Yes.
algebra. And I had peers, so that helped me. And then I had a tutor throughout high school that helped me get my high school math credits and prepare for the SAT and things, because I wanted to go to college. And so she tutored me. I actually got to trade. I would babysit her kids and then she would tutor. And so I actually got work experience too. So it was just kind of, I would ride my bike over to her house in high school and work for a little bit. And then she would help me with math because she was brilliant at it. And so, yeah, they had a community of people and resources that they could pull on to help me get through those things. And I graduated.
You did it.
Yep.
So I think one of the most important things that comes out of homeschooling is shaping of the person and shaping their faith. And so how would you say that that worked for you in your house? Because I know it's different in every single home. So how
Mm-hmm.
are you shaped by the way that you were brought up?
Yeah. Well, I'm so thankful for my parents. And I really think that regardless of where you're putting your kids, like that has to be the priority, is you being intentional about imparting your faith. And so, and homeschooling gives so many opportunities to do that. And so they integrated it into every subject. Often we had Christian curriculum anyway, so it was kind of integrated, but they didn't rely on that. They did, they were making sure that they were discipling me and reading the Bible together as a family, really involved in church. And they just really emphasized to me growing up that God's word was the standard for everything.
Mhm.
And so even if I disagreed with them, it was like, that's okay. Look at God's word because we're not perfect. And so even when I went on to, grow up or have questions, and I think everybody kind of goes through that, I didn't feel like I had to necessarily agree with what my parents said, but I still had that foundation of just, well, let me dig into the word and explore that more. So they just really they took advantage of the time that we had together as a family to talk about that a lot, and that was so important.
I think that is the most important thing. Like you said, taking the time, and you have the time when your kids are home with you more than they're not. And so, uh, aside from all the wonderful academics and the social experiences, to me, that's the most important thing that you're doing as a homeschool parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about college and career because I want to put parents' minds at rest that that actually is possible for
Mm-hmm.
homeschoolers. So you did go on to college. Tell us what you studied, and also how did you transition from being a homeschooler to a college student?
Well, yeah, I went through a phase where in high school, thought that I didn't want to go to college, but actually, another one of the women in our homeschool group, Mrs. Dana Blaylock, she was a writing mentor because writing and English were things that I excelled at, but my parents, again, found somebody that could really kind of mentor me in that. And so she helped me a lot. And she introduced me to journalism when I was through one of the classes I took in our homeschool
Yeah.
co op. It was about journalism. And so I, decided that I did want to go to college and I wanted to pursue that. And so I applied to Patrick Henry College. People that are listening to your podcast are probably more likely to have heard of that than most people. But
Yeah.
even a lot of homeschoolers haven't heard of it because it's just very small. But it's in Northern Virginia. It's a small Christian college, and it is a lot of homeschoolers go there. In fact, when I was there, the majority of the students were homeschooled. But it's a very it markets itself as being a very challenging college, and a lot of people go there for government, but they have brought more programs now too. So I
Okay.
went and I studied journalism. I was able to have some scholarships because, again, with the freedom of homeschooling, um, I had done so many classes with our homeschool group starting in middle school that Mrs. Blaylock led. We actually published and put together a group of homeschool students 2 magazines,
Mhm.
and so that was a amazing experience. And then I was able to go to the local newspaper when I was in high school and ask if I could write a column. And I um, didn't get paid. No, I didn't get paid for it, but I basically begged for them to let me do that. And they did. And they let me write a column every other week. And that got me a journalism scholarship to help pay for my college. And so, anyways, yeah, I studied journalism, and it was awesome. And I can't remember what other aspects you asked, but that's what I studied, and it was great. So, um,
Well, also, how did you transition from a life of
oh,
homeschooling to being a college student in another state, like halfway across the country?
yeah. I honestly, I was ready. I was excited. I had been kind of shy growing up, but I was also pretty ambitious. And I thought, I had a lot of friends that did college locally. And I think that's great. And especially financially, especially now, like that makes a lot of sense. But I just kind of wanted to see another area.
Mhm.
And I mean, it wasn't, going too far. I was going to Virginia, but I loved it. I didn't really have any problems adjusting socially. I had a very solid foundation of friendships
Mhm.
from childhood and high school, and I was just excited to make new friends and get new opportunities. I think probably the biggest shock was not like having a hard time adjusting to being away from home, but whenever a lot of homeschoolers sometimes can kind of feel like, oh, I can do that. That's not going to be too hard. And it was a bunch of very high achieving people. And I got there and I realized there are a lot of people here that are way smarter than me and like, oh, even more ambitious than I am. But that's really good because it's iron sharpening iron. And so I was challenged in good ways, but not like, oh, I'm away from home and, I'm not adjusting. I was ready to get at it. And then I was like, okay, like I'm being really challenged and held to a high standard, but in a good way. And I felt like I was ready for it. A lot of people too, that like roommates and things like that, they were, just really able to handle their schedules well. And even a lot of our professors said that the people teaching at that college where there were so many homeschool students, they noticed a difference because homeschoolers already knew how to study because they had kind of independently managed a lot of their schoolwork for a long time. And
Mhm.
so they didn't have to do as much kind of remedial work or learning how to be independent with their schoolwork. They just were like able to handle it.
Mm.
And so I felt like that too. My parents did a lot of memory work with me growing up, and so studying for tests and things like that, it was a lot of work. Like it was challenging because of the rigor of the classes, but I was able to memorize things and know how to study, and that wasn't like a new skill necessarily that I had to learn.
Yeah, that's good to know because I think a lot of people are worried that if their homeschool isn't super standardized, then their kids are not going to be prepared for university. But I think it's actually kind of the flip of that, that you don't have to be standardized, but you can give your kids a very personal education. Like you said, yours was different than other kids because your every family is different, but you were still prepared academically to go in and meet those challenges. I like also how you said, all around you were other graduates who were high achievers or very ambitious. And so I call that kind of a good peer pressure. I've even
Mm-hmm.
seen that among my teenagers in our homeschool group. Maybe I've got a kid who's a little less than excited about their schoolwork and they don't try very hard until they meet this one kid that inspires them somehow, and they go, wow, they're really smart. Mom, did you know that they know this and this and this? And I just say, yeah, that's cool. And somehow it's like a good peer pressure that encourages my kid to do more, to try harder when they realize, oh, I can do whatever I want to do if I'll just do it. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that, the opposite of bad peer pressure. Um,
Yeah, it was good. And yeah, it's like I didn't. it was good that I had taken some classes in a homeschool co-op setting, and my dad was really good at this, where he taught us even from a young age, like whoever was in his class, to take notes,
Mhm.
listen. But I didn't have to go to public school every day to learn those
Learn
skills,
that. Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, do you know how to listen? Do you know how to read and like
Mhm.
process things critically? Do you know how to memorize information? Then you can learn
Middle
anything.
school. Yeah.
So in any context, that's really all you need to have, are kind of those basic critical thinking skills.
And also we hear all the time that colleges are seeking out homeschool graduates because of the things you said, that they have been more independent throughout their high school years and they're more ready to jump in and learn. And so I just want to put parents' mind at ease that it's very, very doable to send your homeschool kids to college, or straight
Yeah.
into a trade school or the military. All of those things happen all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I
Now,
mean, yeah, definitely.
speaking of college, this is where you met your husband. So tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I yeah, I was like, oh, I'm not going to start dating when I go to college because I'm going to focus on my academics and everything. And then freshman year, I met this guy. and so, and he had been homeschooled. We actually discovered that we had grown up within, well, we had lived about an hour and a half away from each other, but both grown up in North Texas. And I even found out that we had mutual friends. So another extracurricular activity that I did in high school through the freedom of homeschooling was monthly cotillion. And
Um,
that was the big monthly event. I think it's still going.
mhm, like you
So
too.
Yes, and you learn ballroom dancing and social skills and manners and how to eat
Mhm,
at a fancy restaurant and all those
mhm.
things. So, going to a Christian college that was primarily homeschool graduates, there were a ton of dances. And it's cool to go and be like, oh, I actually know, like, this is a waltz, let's waltz. And you're with a bunch of other young adults who know how to do that. And so, it was funny because back in the earlier days of Facebook, I had RSVP'd my freshman year that I was going to go to this dance, and he had RSVP'd on Facebook. And so a friend from back home that I knew from my homeschool group messaged me on Facebook, and she was like, I saw that you and Eli are going to the same dance. And she's like, you have to dance with him. He's one of the best swing dancers I've ever danced with. And
Oh,
she
fun.
was a she was a really good dancer that I knew from homeschooling. And I was like, oh, okay. So I actually asked him to dance
Ooh.
at the dance, and it was a Sadie Hawkins song. So
Um,
we had met, but anyways, we both loved swing dancing, and so we just became really good friends. And I think by the end of the first year, for sure, we knew that it was more than friends, and so we were able to date during college, and we got married shortly after. And then we had both gone away. We're in the kind of DC area, Northern Virginia area. And then by the time we graduated, we missed Texas a lot. So we moved back home. And that's cool too, because now we're back in the same area where we grew up. But yeah, we met there, and um, two homeschool graduates. And yeah.
That also happens quite a bit. It's funny, in our homeschool
Mm-hmm.
group alone, I've counted more than a dozen couples that both grew up homeschooled, some of them within our little co-op, and then got married, and now they are raising kids. And so
Yeah.
my daughter is one of them too. And so it's just kind of funny when people think that they know, they judge homeschoolers and they have no idea what they're talking about because they're all around
Yeah.
you.
I
They're
think a
raising
lot of
homeschoolers.
homeschoolers are like, yeah, even more marriage and family minded a lot of times.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about romantic prospects, um, again, I was like, it's almost kind of a joke because people of how soon they pair off. But then now today you look at like marriage crisis and fertility crisis and stuff, and it's like, well, that's a good thing because they're
It
focused
is.
on family. A lot of people. So
Yes. So now that you are out of college, what do you do?
I love what I get to do. So in college, I really kind of realized through some internships that I loved radio journalism, and that wasn't a surprise because I grew up listening to a lot of talk radio.
Mhm.
Um, Another great thing about homeschooling, we listen to certain shows every single day, and I learned a lot about politics and American government and things through
Yeah.
that. And so one of the shows I grew up listening to a lot was Point of View radio talk show.
Mhm.
And I did a few things when I graduated. I worked primarily for nonprofits, just kind of whatever job I could get, usually in a marketing department, doing copywriting and things like that.
Mhm.
I worked for a Christian magazine, The Stream, for a little while. And then when I got pregnant with my first, I decided to stay home and try freelancing so that I could raise him at home. And somebody that I had worked with at one of the other jobs told me that Point of View Ministries was hiring somebody to do some remote work, and it was primarily writing. And I applied and was like, "Oh, that's so cool!" Because I know I'm very familiar with Point of View, and that was almost 7 years ago. And so I'm still working for Point of View, and I'm actually full time now. And I am a co host for them on the broadcast, and I host one of their podcasts, which is called Know Why Podcast. And I still do a lot of writing for the ministry too. So I'm using my degree and working for a Christian organization that I just really love and appreciate. And so it's kind of neat how that all came full circle.
It is. Your mom mentioned Point of View on her podcast interview because when she and my parents were arrested for homeschooling, they were actually interviewed by that same radio show, and so it really is for your whole family very full circle. And I grew up the same way, listening to Point of View Radio every single day. So I think that's amazing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
tell us about your podcast. What is that about?
So, Know Why Podcast is geared for younger adults. So, I think of the primary target audience as Gen Z, even though we have
Mhm.
listeners of all ages.
Mhm.
And something that Point of View does really well is talk about every current event you can think of from specifically a biblical point of view. Like, how do we apply a Christian worldview to this? And
Mhm.
so, Know Why Podcast is doing that, but kind of, again, geared for a younger audience. And a lot of times when I'm recording, I'm having somebody in mind who maybe they were raised, if not Christian, with at least familiarity with
Mhm.
what Christians teach, but maybe they want to know why. Like, why was I taught this? You know, and they're asking those questions as they're graduating, starting jobs, thinking about starting families. And so we really cover a wide range of things, everything from questions about the Bible to right now our series is on family formation. So like marriage. People have done it for millennia, but why? Why is it a good thing? Is it a good thing? Like what do the statistics actually say? Because many times when you look at research or statistics and things, it happens to back up what God's word teaches.
Interesting.
And so yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence, but sometimes when people are skeptical or questioning, you can kind of start there and then say, look, it lines up, and this now we can know why life works like this. So
Mm.
that's what we try to do in short, around 30-minute episodes on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's a really good podcast, and like you said, it's geared towards younger adults, and I think that's really important because right now there's such a movement for even Christian people. They grew up in a Christian home, perhaps grew up homeschooled, and they're questioning everything, and they're not sure that their parents did it right, or maybe they're not sure why, like you said, why do I believe this, or do
Mm-hmm.
I even believe this? And coming from someone in their age category who grew up the same way and can point to the scriptures and say, well, this is what it says. This is what history shows us. I think it's a really valuable resource because with all the stuff that's on the internet, it's really hard to weed through and find the solid apologetics that this generation of young adults really needs. So it's a good podcast. If you haven't listened to it yet, go and subscribe to the Know Why podcast.
Thank you. Yes, would love to have
Thank
more
you.
subscribers. We're still kind of growing, so thank you.
So, you are a mom now, and you're homeschooling. So I think that's neat too. I think listeners always appreciate hearing a, a homeschool mom who's also still doing a career or some kind of job, because I just put this on my Twitter yesterday that most people don't realize that the majority of homeschool moms earn an income in some way. And there's about a gazillion ways to do it. But, there's this often this idea that you can either homeschool or you can have an income. You can help support the family, but you can't do both. And that's really not true in today's world, especially because of things like this, working from home. There are so many possibilities, and the school day doesn't have to be what the public school day looks like. And so you can do so many things. And so you got a degree, you have a career, and you're homeschooling your two little kids. So can you tell us a little bit about how you balance that, and how homeschooling works for you right now?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is I'm always learning. So I just recently started working full time for Point of View. So I've been employed part time by them since 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this was a good time for the transition because I don't have any babies or kids in diapers or anything
Mm-hmm.
anymore, and so I will give a lot of credit to them because I was actually 4 days out from my due date when I interviewed initially, and I went down to Dallas to their office to interview, and I just unfortunately, you have the question like, are they even going to consider me? Because clearly I'm
Mm-hmm.
about to have a baby. But
Mm-hmm.
they did, and I went into labor while I was still like in the process of submitting paperwork, and I was like emailing them from the hospital, and the person who became my boss was like, focus on having your baby, please, and like get back to us in a like later. And
That's amazing.
so but I think a lot of places are moving more toward a little more flexibility like that, which I think is great. Because I'm still able to work from home most of the time. And so yeah, we're just I it's a lot of trying to be disciplined with my own schedule, um, a lot of relying on the Lord, and then yeah, especially at this age, I mean, we I get up early, and that works for me because I'm an early bird, and I try to knock out some work and like Bible time and stuff. And that doesn't happen every morning, but that's what I aim for. And then um, the boys, they pretty much independently entertain themselves. And I think that's a benefit of homeschooling. I mean, they're still pretty young, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of in how you raise them. Like when they've got a little more independent time, then they can learn how to entertain themselves. And so I'll
Yeah.
say, get a snack, listen to your audiobook, go play, do a puzzle, and usually they do. And then when we do start school, we're usually done before lunchtime. I mean, I've got a preschooler and a second grader.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you just have two or a few, like you don't have 30 kids in a classroom, um,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take that long. And I know it
Yeah.
will take longer the older they get, but my oldest, he's already learning how to read. So there are already certain pages where I'm like, oh, here's math. Like you can tell that these are addition problems and subtraction problems. Like work on this page while teach your brother the letter C or something.
Yeah.
And, he's already learning how to do stuff independently. Um, my husband helps a lot too. So his schedule allows him to be home sometimes in irregular hours. And he being homeschooled and knowing the benefit of that, he's very supportive. And so
Mm-hmm.
he will help a lot. And so having a team is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of we take it day by day. And I am kind of just flexible. And if we've got a play date or a co-op or a social thing, then we rearrange it and it's not the end of the world. It's like
Mm-hmm.
we go and do our co-op classes, and then we come home and, catch up on lessons if we need to, or okay, you get to entertain yourselves because mom's got to work. And I don't
Yeah.
they complain sometimes. I mean, they're not perfect, but I also think it's okay for them to learn that like the world doesn't revolve around them either. So sometimes you have to entertain yourself or go, be okay for a little bit while your parents take care of something, and they get to see us try to balance all of that.
Oh, wow. Boredom is such a gift, I think, that is
Yeah.
underutilized today, that it really drives kids to try something else and create, or, just play with their imagination. I think it's a really helpful part of parenting, is to let them get bored.
Oh yeah.
Here's a question. Do you let your kids play on screen devices?
No. So we don't do iPads or anything or cell phones. And I have a series on technology and AI actually on the No Why
Yes,
podcast.
that's a good series.
And that was a hard rule that we personally implemented from the get go, was like, and part of it is also knowing my own weaknesses.
Mhm,
So I think that's important if you're going to homeschool, is like, okay, I know my own weaknesses. So what do I need to set in place that's like accountability for me?
mhm,
So when we actually don't have a TV downstairs in our living room, because I know I would turn it on a lot. So we
mhm.
do have a TV in the house, but it's in a separate room. It's in our upstairs area. And I do let the boys watch TV. I do, but I try to limit it and keep, especially if it's like not a family movie night, it's educational shows. Like
Yeah.
Amazon Prime has Wild Kratts, and I grew up
Oh,
watching
yeah.
Zaboomafoo, and my kids, they
Yeah.
love animals. And oh my gosh, I think my oldest son can tell you like pretty any animal fact you want.
I
So I'm
used to
like,
know a boy
okay,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if I need to work for a couple hours because I'm like on a deadline and they watch, a nature show, I'm okay with that. But
Mhm.
then it's like, okay, go play outside, and you're not like having a small screen that you're looking at all the time. So
Yes.
that's the balance that we've struck in our family for now.
I think more and more young families like yours are doing that because, I grew up without that kind of thing, and then my kids have grown up with it. But my daughter, who's married and has kids, is so anti-screen for her kids. So it's like that pendulum has swung back and forth, and now young families are saying, no, we're not doing that with our kids. And she also pulls up the really old shows like Little Bear and things like that for her boys, or her
Yeah.
children to watch. Um, so I think it's fun, and of course it's nostalgic for her too. But I think
Yeah.
it's very wise also.
Hmm.
I was going to ask you, is there anything you might do differently from the way you were homeschooled now? I know things keep changing and progressing in the homeschool world. There's things happening now that we didn't have when you were a kid, and when I was a kid. So, have you noticed anything that you'd say, I'm not doing that, or I'm going to do this because it was so cool?
Um, well, there are a lot of things I want to emulate that I think my parents did well, and including like taking time to make it fun
Mm-hmm.
and allowing me to explore so many different um, extracurricular activities. And so,
Mm-hmm.
since I'm working, we're constantly thinking about the balance, because it's also important to not run your family ragged. And people
Mm-hmm.
may not realize that, but I think that's actually really common in homeschooling families.
It is.
In fact, just this morning, we were socializing at the park with some homeschool friends, and we were just talking about, like, in our county alone, all the different homeschool groups. And there's band, and there's theater, and there's, this class and that class. And, oh, we're in, martial arts, and we're in gymnastics. And
Mhm.
one of the moms was like, you could be so busy doing all the fun stuff that you don't actually have time for school.
That is so true. So true.
Yeah. So I think my challenge is I want to give them all the experiences, but also create enough margin for us to not be run down as a family.
Hmm.
Um, and then really not necessarily like, because the way I was homeschooled was wrong. I got a very good, solid education. But when I went to college, they really, my alma mater really emphasizes classical liberal arts. And so I hadn't really been exposed to a classical education before
Uh-huh.
then.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm like we're reading, Plato and like all these classics in college, and I'm like encountering it for the first time. And my husband, who was, my friend and then boyfriend at the time, he was familiar with them because he had read them in high school. And I was like, "You've read these things?" And I mean, I read very widely, like I read a
Yeah.
lot, but he specifically went to a co-op that was like a classical co-op.
That's,
And so from that moment, I was like, I really want my kids to do like classical education. And
uh-huh.
I took a pedagogy class in college as an elective and we learned about Charlotte Mason, we learned about John
Mhm.
Dewey, we learned about all these different things. And so I guess it's more just kind of refined, like, oh, I kind of want to do this method. Not
Yeah.
because what I had was bad or wrong, but there's just so much richness
Mhm.
here as I learn more about it. And it's kind of fun to be aware of that and apply that intentionally.
I think that's the gift of the modern homeschool movement is there's so many ideas that we didn't know about in the 80s and the 90s, the all the different types of homeschooling, the different methods, and then of course now with the internet, um, there's so much information going around. And so even if you're brand new to homeschooling, you can get an education really quickly in all the different possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, what you face as a modern homeschool mom is just there are so many possibilities. How could you
Yeah.
ever narrow it down?
Yeah, it's a wealth of choices. So we do classical conversations. That's what we're doing right now.
Okay.
And again, I there are so many options and so many curriculums, but I knew going back to kind of what my weaknesses were, I knew I needed some sort of structure and accountability
Mhm.
just for me.
Mhm.
And I knew I had was familiar with classical conversations because I had friends who had done it growing up, and I was kind of like, okay, pick one. Like, let's do that. We're familiar
Yeah.
with it. It's established. It has the structure.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, you still have the freedom as a homeschooler, but it kind of guides you through certain things, and it's
Mhm.
from the classical perspective. So, because yeah, I spent hours and hours researching and learning online, like, and just overwhelmed by all the curriculum choices. So
Mhm.
at some point, it's like, okay, we're going to do this, and just like make a choice, and you learn as you go, and you can refine along the way. But
You
that's what
can. You
we,
can change every year if you want to.
yeah. So it's working. It's working well for us for now. But we're also very open of like, hey, if something doesn't work out in the future, we can just pivot. It's not, it's okay to not know how it's going to go 10 years from now.
Well, before we close, I want to ask you if there's something that you would say to someone who is not homeschooling, but they're interested and a little scared of the possibilities. Since you were homeschooled and now you are a homeschool mom, what can you share with someone like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many opportunities in homeschooling. It's so it's so special to just be able to have that time with your kids. That's one of the
Mhm.
things I love about it is, just the quality time. And and there are so many reasons people homeschool, but for us, we really want them to have a good education and um, be able to instill our values in them. And not that that's impossible in other settings, but you're going to have to be correcting a lot
Yeah.
especially if you're a Christian, instead of just like introducing what's true from the beginning. And um, so it's so good for that. And then, yeah, I would just say pick something that works for you. So last year I ordered this curriculum that I had heard a lot about and I was kind of familiar with it. And so I ordered it for my son who was going to start learning how to read and everything. And I got it in and it was so overwhelming. It had all these different parts and like pieces that you had to cut out and assemble and watch this DVD before you teach this lesson. And it was just a lot. And I was like, I'm just not going to do that. Like, that's not realistic for me. And I know myself. And so I asked some other homeschool moms that were in our co op, and they recommended another curriculum. And one mom said, I can do it at 8 in the morning with no coffee, because it's just like you open it and it has the lesson laid out. And I was like, okay, I ordered that, and then it was great. And so I think, don't compare yourself to other people either, because what works great for one family, it might not work for you or your kid. And so
Absolutely.
that's okay. Like, I realize we're not going to probably do as much crafty stuff, or they can do that at co-op, but that's not something that I'm going to really do here. And I'm okay with that. So just kind of knowing that you can tailor it to your needs and your child's needs. And then just get involved in a community. Like, there are so many communities, and then it's so encouraging to be around other parents that are walking the same path.
And I would add, if you happen to be in a place where there's not enough community, that might be the sign that you need to start a community, even if it's just a park day or something, so that you get to know other like-minded parents and they get to know other like-minded parents too. That helped me all the way through. And I was homeschooled, so I didn't need to be sold on the idea. You're probably the same way. Like, you did not need to be talked into this, but as the mom, you're still figuring things out, and you still need support from other parents who are like-minded. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I've always said that my homeschool group is kind of like my church family, like another church family. You get close to these
Mm-hmm.
people because you share the same ideas and you share the same goals for your kids. And all of a sudden you're taking meals to someone who just had a baby, or they're picking your kids up for something. And so
Yeah.
it's very valuable. I don't know how people homeschool without a community, honestly.
Yeah. It's not, people may have the false idea that homeschooling is like this isolated thing. And maybe for a few people, it is, but I
Yeah.
think it's actually so rich in community, but you get to pick your community.
Hmm.
And yeah, like when we moved to the town where we live now, I went on Facebook and just looked up homeschool groups, and like all these local Facebook groups, and some of them are like advertising co-ops. Some of them are just hangout, and families will be like, hey, we have kids this ages. We're going to go to
Yes,
the park on these days of the week if anybody wants a play date. And it's like, people are like, we'll be there, and that they're go and they make homeschool friends. And it's like, that's how easy it is to find people.
it is. And then you never know, your son may grow up and marry someone's homeschooled daughter, and then you've done the next generation. That's what I think is so fun when I talk to all these adults, and I just think, oh, it's like a homeschool mom and a homeschool dad married each other, or not homeschool mom and dad, but a boy and a girl. They grew up this way, and I think it gives them such a different outlook on raising kids because they had a very, very different upbringing. Um, I say this to people all the time. Imagine kids who've never been in a public school. Can you imagine that? And then imagine when they grow up and become parents. It's a very different outlook. And so that's why I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk to you today, because you have that. You have that. I've never been to public school. Here's what life is like. It's very normal. You're not a weirdo. You are successful in your career and you're homeschooling your kids. And I think that's the picture that more people need to see, because it's really happening all around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I run into homeschool graduates all the time.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was fun. I think it's very enlightening, and I appreciate you being willing to share your story today. Can you tell me where our listeners can find you? Do you have a website, radio show, all of that?
Yeah. So knowwhypodcast.com. So that's KNOWY, WHY. So it's, anyway, yes, knowwhypodcast.com is where you can find the podcast. It's also on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. And so I would encourage people to follow us there. And then if you want to follow Point of View Radio Talk Show on social media as well, or go to pointofview.net, you can find a station in your area that carries the show.
Awesome. I think our listeners will definitely tune in. I'm excited to find out if people are going to tune into Point of View for the first time ever. So that'll be cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This was fun, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to my podcast today. If you want more content like this, you can go to my website at nickitruesdell.com. That's NICKITRUESDELL.com. And find me on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
You're listening to the Biblical Family Network.